So firstly, what we're going to do is prep the 4 lower side panels. They should all look like this at the end, with the 400mm extrusion attached to it on the back, like that. So the way we install this is take the back panel for example. The orientation for this one does matter, so the way we will orientate it is by having this circle on the right hand side and then fixing the extrusion onto the front like this. So that's the orientation for the back panel. Circle on the right and then the extrusion on the front. And we attach the extrusion by using a M4x12 bolt, an M4 spring washer and a T-nut. So take the bolt and the washer, push it through one of the top 3 holes and then fasten on the T-nut. You only want to thread it halfway down. And we do the same again for the other 2 holes. Next we take the extrusion and slot it on, and then just for now hand fasten these bolts in. Again, for now we don't want to tighten them all the way down, we still want to be able to move this extrusion side to side. Next we're going to want to do the same with the bolts and the T-nuts for the 2 holes on either side. Right, so that's now prepped. So this is the lower back panel, and the orientation, as I mentioned before, is important. With the other 3 panels, this being the front panel, it's completely symmetrical, so the orientation doesn't matter. These are the 2 lower side panels. Because they'll go on either side, the orientation for these doesn't matter as long as they're opposite. So one pointing one way and the other's pointing the other way. So when we fix them onto the sides, they're both symmetrical. Right, so now we'll fix the side panels onto the frame. We'll start with the left and right side panel, and the way we do this is simply slide it through like so and let the T-nuts sit into the grooves on the extrusion. And what we want to make sure here is that everything is nice and flush. So we want the bottom of this panel to be flush with the bottom of this extrusion, and the same on this side too. Once you've got it set and flush, just tighten down these screws. You want to tighten down the outermost ones first, and then once they're secure and everything's flush, tighten down the center 3. Right, Next, just flip it over and then install the other side panel on the opposite side, same as before. Next we'll install the front panel. And finally we'll install the back panel. Again, you want to constantly be making sure that the bottom of the frame is completely flush with the extrusions. Next, what needs to be prepped in the same way is the base panel. So we want to put bolts into the 8 outermost holes, so you'll have 2 on each side. And just like we did with the other panels, we want to slide a M4 12mm bolt with a spring washer through these holes and then fasten on a T-nut, again threading only halfway through. So once you've got all the bolts and the T-nuts in place, we can now install this into the frame. The orientation is important. You basically want to slide it in and get it so that the motor mount holes are at the back, and this is probably the trickiest part of assembling the frame. Because you want to get the nuts orientated in the direction of the groove so that they slot in, and this can be quite tricky, so just take your time with this. So once you've got all the T-nuts orientated correctly, you should be able to just push down and have them just slot into place. Again, you may need to pull it in to get it to slot in to the corners, so that might be something to bear in mind. And once you've got it in and it's tight, you can just tighten down these bolts. Okay, and that's essentially the lower part of the frame built. So next we want to install the top corner panels. I recommend starting with the top back panel, and the orientation for this is important. It's the holes that are only, the 8mm holes that are only cut halfway into the HDPE need to be facing into the frame, and it needs to be secured with 6 bolts on the outermost 4mm holes. Then you want to install the back two side corner panels. The orientation for these is important as well. You want the side with the groove cut into it facing outwards, and the same with the back right side panel. This is with the machine facing you now. You want the groove you want the side with the groove that's cut out of it facing outwards as well. The front side corner panels are identical. Orientation is very important for these. You want the longest side aligned with the top of the machine, and the shorter side aligned with the front of the frame. And it's the same with the one on the left hand side as well, like so. Next, you want to take the frame assembly and lay it down on its back, like so. And you want to prep these front corner panels first. Make sure you get the orientation correct. You want the hole that's cut halfway into these panels facing into the machine. So ideally you want it like so. And that hole is facing inwards and is nearest the side extrusion, and it should be mirrored on the other side. So it should look like this when installed. So with the orientation in mind, you want to prep these with the M4x12 bolts and T-nuts. Right, so with the machine on its back now, insert one of the 445mm shafts, and you want it to hit the back of the hole that's in the back panel, and then you want to drop 2 bronze bushings down the shaft. If you have trouble getting them through, I recommend taking some sandpaper and just sanding the edges of the shaft to make it a little easier for the bushings to get down. Another point is you don't want the bushings to be trapped between the shaft and the extrusion, so just bear that in mind when installing this. Next, take the corresponding front panel bracket, slide the T-nuts in and align the shaft with the hole on the inside of this panel and push down. Once the shaft is inserted and sandwiched between the 2 panels, we can tighten it down. Make sure again that you have this panel, the top of this panel flush with the top of the frame, and the side of the panel flush with the side of the frame as well. And you want to repeat the same thing again for this side. So take the second 445mm shaft, make sure it's pushed all the way through that hole. Again, drop 2 bronze bushings down it, making sure they don't get trapped between the shaft and the extrusion, and then sandwich it in place with the HDPE panel. And that is the frame complete.